You probably distrust academics, but you can't distrust someone who's successful. And these individuals have been successful in each of their own unique ways. I have my own experiences with each one of them, and be more than happy to share horror stories about these individuals up front. But since we're going to try and do this on a positive note, we'll let them tell you about their own experiences. What I would encourage you to do is if you have a cell phone or a smartphone, you go ahead and mute it now so that you're the only one knows it's ringing. If you have a laptop, close it down because we don't want to interfere with the individual sitting behind you enjoying this. And I would like to acknowledge the fact that this is being organized and supported by the Office of Alumni Affairs. They're the ones that provided the food. And I'd like to ask them to come forward and perhaps say a few words about the program, and then I'll... Katie's going. Okay. Then I'll have Katie come forward. Interestingly enough, last week I was lecturing to the P1 students over in Ashburn and to the students here in Winchester by teleconference and talking to them about the importance of developing a resume. And we were talking about the logistics of a resume, and I actually ended up talking about the importance of networking through LinkedIn and social media, which I think is an important step forward from where we've been in the past. Most of the time when you interview for a position, you present all of your credentials in the form of a paper resume, and you ask individuals to evaluate that and then offer you a position or a residency or whatever. Things have changed a lot. Now it's done, in a sense, electronically, and it's also important that you attend to the networks that you develop, because a lot of times the opportunities that are created will go unnoticed if you don't have a good network of friends and colleagues that you keep in touch with through things like LinkedIn and through events like this. Last year when we did this, the program lasted about an hour and a half. When it was over, the 4 people that were participating went out into the hall because we needed the classroom for class, and there was a whole covey of people that followed them, asking for their business cards, asking them for contact information. And I think that's the same thing that we're going to probably see here. When you hear the unique stories of these 4 individuals and what they have done in their careers since they graduated, I think you're going to find that they are incredibly valuable, both from their life experiences and what they've been able to do, but also from the standpoint of them opening doors for you in each of their respective fields. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Katie, let her talk a little bit about this, and then she's going to lead you through the program.
So my name is Katie Sanders. I am a 2011 graduate of the pharmacy school here as well as the business school here on campus. And I am one of the pharmacy representatives on the SU Alumni Board and serve on the Admissions and Career Services Committee that is putting on this event today. And we took on this challenge to provide students with the opportunity to see what people who came before you are actually doing with their education from SU. And the pharmacy school was actually one of the first programs that we tackled, and we had our first successful event last year, much with the help of Dean McKay and Don Haberda and the buy-in of your faculty to bring in panelists from a variety of different fields to allow you to get your questions answered from somebody who's not going to stand up here and give you a book lecture. I think from a student perception, I wasn't in your shoes that long ago, and I know that it means a lot more coming from somebody who was there and on a daily basis. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to encourage you to ask honest questions. I think all 4 panelists, when they introduce themselves, will probably tell you they're willing to give you, to talk about probably most anything, and will give you honest answers. So you're going to get the most out of this if you be honest with them, and they'll be honest back with you. So I guess you mean to turn it back over to Dr. McKay, and he will introduce the panelists.
Thanks. I want to introduce these individuals in the order in which I'm standing behind them. This is Jenny Davis. Jenny always had the run of my office. If things weren't going well, I could count on her telling me. And she took the verbatim admonition that I have an open door policy literally, and would camp out in my office for hours telling me how to run the pharmacy school. She also was an entrepreneur. She's done a fellowship. She's been in practice in a large institutional hospital that has 1,000 beds, and she's now doing one of the more unique things in pharmacy practice. She's helping athletes. and I think she'll share what she does with athletes in Pittsburgh with you when she does. Danny Sykogian and I got to know each other when 9/11 occurred. And Danny was standing out in front of my office while I was figuring out what I could tell the students from what was going on that day with a cell phone in each hand, trying desperately to get in touch with someone. I called her into my office. I sat her down and I said, Danny, I said, everybody's trying to do exactly what you're doing. They're trying to reach someone on a cell phone. I said, give it some time, keep trying and get through. I said, the more important thing is you're a leader in your class. You need to get a grip. I said, because when people look at you, if you're shaken, they're going to be shaken. And she sat there for a second. I said, can you do this? And she said, yes. She went out the door. And she's done some remarkable things since then. Sally Mayer always had a goal in her mind. Pharmacy was just one step toward a career. She wanted to get an MBA, so she did that. She wanted to get a fellowship, she did that. She came back and she got into academia, and she teaches at VCU quite effectively and has modeled her own practice. So she's got, along with some of the others, the dual degree that some of you are interested in. How do you combine the business aspects with the clinical aspects of pharmacy and do it successfully? And she's done that quite effectively. You come to my office, you'll see a flag out in front of it. It was a gift to Ben when he was over at Bagram Air Force Base. Ben actually went from being a Texan with a belt buckle and boots to prove it to being in the military and then deciding he didn't like that branch, so he switched branches. And he's now in the Coast Guard, stationed out of Norfolk. And he'll tell you to a great extent what federal pharmacy is like and what a career there can be. He was also sharing with me that he's lost a lot of weight because he's become addicted to marathoning. So if you're interested in going through a pair of sneakers every 2 months, he's the person to talk to. Let me ask each one of them, beginning with Jenny, to share a couple of minutes of their personal story and their experiences, and then we'll open it up to the floor for you to speak. That includes the Ashburn students. If you have questions, be sure and actuate your mics. And these individuals are here to answer your questions. They'll start the ball rolling by telling you a little bit about what they do, beginning with Jenny.
Thanks. We should pull this. We can't pull it closer. Short people syndrome.
You want to introduce your daughter while you're at it?
Huh?
You want to introduce your daughter?
Oh, and for everybody in the room, that's my daughter sitting over there. Elizabeth, wave to everybody. I embarrassed her. So anyway, my name is Jenny Davis. Currently, I am the System Director for Outpatient Pharmacy Services through the West Penn Allegheny Health Network. If any of you are from the Pittsburgh area, you know recently Highmark bought us out and we are now called the Allegheny Health Network. It's been a little confusing over what my role is because as the weeks go by, I find out I'm responsible for more and more every day. My career started here at Shenandoah. After Shenandoah, I went to the University of Texas and did a residency in managed care. I am one of the PharmD MBA students from back then. I think we've had the largest class. There was 20 or 22 went through my class. We were the largest MBA class. Thought I would do something in managed care, and when I started interviewing positions, it was really managed care, primary care, so I took an ambulatory care position in one of the largest indigent care hospitals in the country, and learned all about the Public Health Service Pricing Program and became an expert in what we now know as the 340B program. Actually changed the financial picture for that university from where they, or for that hospital, when they were $25 million in debt every year to or $16 million in debt, and they went to a $25 million profit in pharmacy. From there, I was recruited directly to the Office of Pharmacy Affairs, worked for, as Ben probably knows, some of those people, worked for them for a while, and then went into consulting because I like to move around the country a lot, and ended up back in Pittsburgh, spent some time with some major university teaching hospitals across the country, came back to Pittsburgh, and went to work for the Allegheny General Hospital at the time, and my role has grown from there. While I was there, and this is where I'm probably going to get my most questions today, I was asked to look at sports medicine and what we could do for sports medicine. And I know Dean McKay will laugh when I say this. I wrote the most unfavorable contract that I could possibly write to take on sports medicine, and I was still awarded the contract for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And since then, I have picked up the Pittsburgh Pirates, I have the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, I have Robert Morris University. I see over 500 student athletes in that program, and we are close to picking up one more university in Pittsburgh. So that's, I still oversee all of the clinical pharmacy programs to reduce length of stay, help reduce readmissions, and to provide indigent services for these hospitals. So it's quite a busy job.
So can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So my name is Danny Sykajian. I actually had a career prior to coming to Shenandoah University because I was an older student when I came. I began with a bachelor's in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology, and I was a research assistant for several years before realizing that I wanted to move my career into a position that had a little more social interaction. For those of you who have ever worked in a lab, you know, it's kind of a quiet place, and I tend to not be such a quiet person. So I came to Shenandoah University, got my PharmD in 2004. After that, I also did a year of residency at Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. I picked that program specifically because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left here. And they had a program that was well balanced between half AmCare and half inpatient. So I thought I'd get a nice broad exposure. What happened was it turned out that they had an investigational drug service, so they were running clinical trials at the hospital. They also had a CPOE go live while I was there, so computerized physician order entry, they were implementing an electronic medical record while I was there. And so I had the unique opportunity as a resident to be involved with an EHR go live and realized that that was what I loved. That I had this IT geek side just waiting to come out. So after finishing up my residency, I actually worked for Micromedics, and I assume you guys have used Micromedics. So I wrote some of those drug monographs. We don't get to sign them, sorry. But a lot of the work that I did with them was on their clinical decision support tools. So drug interaction checkers, the different types of building the databases behind for all sorts of clinical decision support functionality. So I did that I was at Micromedics for about 7 years. About halfway through that, they needed someone to join their clinical terminology team. I had no idea what that was, but I said, okay, fine. It turns out that clinical terminologists are folks who have 1 foot in the IT world and 1 foot in clinical practice. And we bridge that gap for folks. So although when you guys see something that says Coumadin 5 milligrams and warfarin 5, you know that those are close to the same thing. A computer does not. They're completely separate entities. Clinical terminologists kind of bridge that gap, and we build databases that can translate clinical information in a safe and effective way. So I think you guys have probably heard about Obamacare and the call for interoperability between electronic medical records. I'm one tiny, tiny, tiny part of that process. While I was at Micromedics, I was actually contacted by a company called CSC, and they had a contract with the National Institutes of Health. The National Institutes of Health is trying to do very much the same thing. All of the various institutes, like the National Cancer Institute, the Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, all of that clinical trial study data has grown up in separate systems. So they're having the same interoperability challenge that the rest of the country is battling with. So they brought me on as a clinical terminologist, and now I am a contractor with the federal government. I'm not a federal employee. but working with the electronic medical data that has resulted from clinical trials from 1976 to now. You can imagine what drug information, what kind of drug data I got from 1976. Also realizing that it's drug information before things are FDA approved. So I work with a lot of drug names that were MK843 and now are losartan. So I have to translate all of those. It's definitely a niche job, not something I set out to do, but my pharmacy background and my comfort with IT that I gathered from Shenandoah University are critical to the fact that I got this position and I'm successful in it. So I actually live in Denver. I work out of my home, and I fly into Washington, D.C. once a quarter to meet with my team for about a week. So that's where I'm at.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sally Mayer, the class of 2001, second graduating class from this wonderful place, and I keep feeling myself being drawn to where I sat every day for a full year, right about where you are in the tan sweater. I just feel like I need to go sit back there, but I'll try my best to stay here and not move around. It's amazing to be here and see you all and see some of my mentors that are still here. It's just truly inspiring, and one of the reasons I've ended up where I am now on faculty is because I think that I was so inspired by what happened to me here, by the faculty, by the experiences, by the dean, and the innovation that was going on, and the ability to learn that it's okay to do something new and try something new, which is what Shenandoah was about when I came here. And I still feel like it's a very innovative curriculum with a bunch of leaders liking to shake things up. I feel like I'm in a position where I've shaken things up quite a bit, even though I have the academic title of assistant professor. When I left Shenandoah, I went on to do a residency in a geriatric ambulatory care program at the Durham VA. So I trained in a VA system, and then I knew I fell in love with taking care of patients, talking to them, helping them, working on teams to help patients in the AmCare setting. But I also was very interested in inpatient practice and what happened there, rounding with teams and helping the clinicians and patients in that setting. So I initially started out at Inova Fairfax Hospital as a clinical geriatric specialist and learned a lot from that particular experience. I'll never forget when a physician said to me, there were over 1,000 admitting physicians at the time at that hospital, and said to me, "Why are you on my team? What do you bring to the table?" And I said, "How long do you have for me to talk to you about what I bring to the table?" And I started to list off things with the patients we were rounding on that were important and why we were needed, why pharmacists were needed. After that, I moved on to an ambulatory care position at Fort Belvoir as a clinical pharmacist and did a whole lot of anticoagulation and disease state management there. Then I moved on to an independent pharmacy for a little bit in that practice, and after that I ended up on faculty at VCU School of Pharmacy and have been there for 8 years. Since I've been there, I've done a lot of different things. But right now what I do, a huge part of what I do is not in the walls of the pharmacy school, it's outside of the walls of the pharmacy school, establishing new practice sites for students to come learn, and also developed a residency program, which is one of the first co-funded free clinic School of Pharmacy type of residency program. It's an ambulatory care residency. I'm in practice in the free clinics and the safety net in Richmond and outside of Richmond, and have really, I think, done some innovative things with showing how pharmacists can really improve care for patients in chronic diseases, especially those that are uninsured or have access issues or those that suffer from health disparities. So that's where I am now. Thanks for having me.
My name is Ben Keller from the 2007 class of Shenandoah. I've done a number of things since I've graduated. I knew that I wanted to serve in the military probably since I started going to college. I come from a military family, and I decided the Air Force was the way to go for me. The most important thing in that decision is that they were willing to pick up half the tab for pharmacy school, so that sounded pretty stellar compared to what the other services were offering at the time. So I said I'll put on the blue, took a scholarship, and they paid for the last 2 years, and I owed them a couple years service for that. I started out with the Air Force in Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Was the chief of pharmacy for an ambulatory care center. Had a budget of about $7.6 million and a patient population that we were responsible for pharmacy care for of about 17,000. Was part of the formulary committee and helped decide what drugs we were going to carry to optimize therapy for those patients and make the most cost-effective decisions. I knew that I wanted to be engaged a little more in clinical pharmacy, and those options weren't really there at the time. But while I was there, I had the chance to deploy to Afghanistan for 6 months, and spinning up for that and doing some training, I got to train at Baltimore Shock Trauma for 3 weeks, and I got over there, and we were doing trauma pharmacy and clinical pharmacy, and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to round with docs, I want to see the patients right when they come in, and that's where I want to steer my career to. So I finished up my commitment for the Air Force. I worked for them for about 3.5 years, and anybody who's worked with the government knows that things are never necessarily predictable for hiring and firing. So I separated from the Air Force and I said, all right, Indian Health Service, here I come. I know that they do tons of clinical work, a lot of advanced practice by yourself. That's what I'm going to do. So I got my separation orders from the Air Force, and I called up the detailer for the Indian Health Service, and I said, all right, what do we have available? And he said, nothing. The government's not hiring. So I said, oh. So I ended up taking an inadvertent 4-month hiatus where I was jobless, homeless, and living in a travel trailer with my wife. So keep in mind that she is, fortunately, she's a gem. In addition to getting a farm deal, I also found me a wife here, so that can work out for you if that's something that you're looking for. Keep that in mind. Look left, right. You never know what's around the corner. So I ended up taking a 4-month hiatus, and my wife and I just traveled around in a travel trailer and saw the United States. And the whole 4 months I was sweating it as all my savings were dwindling down, and didn't seem like a great idea. But then the paperwork finally went through. So Indian Health Service came through. I got to get a great experience along the way. And we moved from, I can't tell you where we moved from because we were in a Walmart parking lot somewhere when I got the call. But I don't know where we moved from, but we ended up in Anchorage, Alaska, which was interesting in and of itself. A lot of folks think Alaska, and I remember I was selling my wife on the idea, and she's like, Alaska, it's really cold up there. I'm not even sure they have a Walmart. And I sat her down, and I said, baby, let me tell you how it's going to be. And I credit Shenandoah for this with all the technology that they gave me and the experience that I have. I put together a PowerPoint to lay it out for her for the economic and financial benefits of moving to Alaska. So there was tons, and it kind of went wah, economic benefits, last slide, there's 5 malls and 2 Walmarts, so you'll be good. So we ended up in Alaska, and got to work on my dream of being a clinical pharmacist, and I worked up there for 2 years as a decentralized clinical pharmacist in the ICU. So I was with the doctors every morning, getting to round. It was the only level 1 trauma center in the state, so whenever there were traumas, they flew them all to Anchorage Native Medical Center, regardless of whether they were native or not. We offered the best care, so that's where they went. So I got to fulfill that dream, and I really enjoyed that, and that was super fulfilling. But eventually, due to challenges with the Indian Health Service, some of them are federally funded and some of them are steered by the tribe. So the tribe essentially controls the hiring and firing, and the location maybe wasn't as stable as I would have liked for long-term security. Eventually your wife will twist your arm and tell you need to start a family, so decided it was time to look for something more stable. So I was able to parlay that active duty time with the Air Force and with being a uniformed public health service officer with the Indian Health Service to the Coast Guard. And like Dean McKay said, networking, every job I've got has all been due to networking, either people that I met at Shenandoah or people that I met in the services. I didn't earn a single job on my own. It was all through help from folks that I'd met along the way, so that's very important. So I ended up at the Coast Guard, and I was kind of concerned that I wasn't going to get to do clinical pharmacy, and that's really what I wanted to do. But for me, I found that this has really been the best mix of any job that I've had. My day spent probably about 1/3 of the time doing clinical work and actually engaging the patients and seeing them independent of a medical provider. And we really get a lot of professional discretion and leeway. So folks in the Coast Guard, it kind of works like an HMO for the health care that they receive. So you have access to everybody's healthcare data. So occasionally I'll generate a list of all the patients with a hemoglobin A1C greater than 7 or an LDL greater than 300, and you can engage those patients directly and start new therapy, change therapy that they're on. So about 1/3 of my day is spent doing that, and that's really rewarding to get that independent practice. I really like that. Although it's not inpatient, the Coast Guard doesn't have any inpatient facilities, I still find that really rewarding. The other third is just spent doing the traditional dispensing functions that you would imagine. And the last third is really doing pharmacy logistics. In addition to having the ambulatory care center that I work at, there's 2 other clinics that I oversee. Probably about 12.5 cutters, and each cutter has a sick bay on it and an independent enlisted medical provider. So you have to work to train them and ensure that they're having drugs that they need to stock to treat the type of patients that they may have, whether it's a Coast Guard person who gets hurt or a migrant that they pick up who's trying to sneak into America, or a drug runner that they interdict who has some sort of healthcare issues. They're the primary provider for them. So a good portion of my time is spent training them to ensure that they're competent in the formulary that they're allowed to prescribe and administer for patients. And that about sums it up in a nutshell.
Thanks for the levity.
Try.
Ben used that on me a lot when I was in class if he thought I was taking things too seriously. He would sit in the conference room and lean back in the chair and twiddle his thumbs and wait for me to amuse him.
It's true.
I'm going to open it up to questions. At the appropriate time, I'll come back up and let you know that we're about out of time, but I'd like to have the input of the students here in Ashburn, and the questions are to these individuals, not to me. So if you could, go ahead and direct your questions.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here to communicate success you've had and hopefully inspire some of us to go above and beyond and be better students or whatnot, so we can hopefully have similar success later. I'd like to address actually all 4 panelists. I'd like to hear your perspective on we keep hearing about the PharmD programs that are expanding in the U.S. Pretty dramatically in the last decade or so. A lot more graduates are on the market. So post-grad education is being emphasized a lot more in terms of how to differentiate yourself. And so I'm just wanting to know from all 4 panelists, at what point, what types of skills should we be working on as pharmacy students now to distinguish ourselves in addition to post-grad education? Just what kinds of qualities and skills are they looking for to have a unique place in the new healthcare model and in the various disciplines that you all are in?
I think there's 2 things that you want to keep in mind to address that question. One, the expectations of the patients and the medical providers that we work with are changing. So these new things that you're doing and learning now, although you might not see the value at the time, those skills are going to be applied later in life. Case in point, I remember going through patient cases as a student here, and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, this is dumb. I'm going to go dispense drugs all day. I'm never going to use this stuff. Lo and behold, I'm seeing patients now and prescribing medications, and at the time, I didn't see that Shenandoah was training me to be a pharmacist of the future instead of a pharmacist at that point in time. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Additionally, seek out extra educational opportunities, whether it's a residency or whether you go and get a board certification on your own. I think that those give you more options and set yourself apart from other pharmacists that maybe you're more qualified, or at the very least says that you're willing to go the extra mile. So I think that keeping in mind that we're being forced to change as the expectations of the providers and the patients changes, but there's also things that you can do, extra education, to set yourself up for the opportunities to practice in the way that you want to practice.
Okay, thank you. That was a great question. Ways I think you can prepare yourselves for the future of the profession. Number 1, find what you're passionate about now. Find what you love about the practice of pharmacy. You're a professional already now. You're in the profession. This is a small profession, so the networking comment was key. people sitting beside you might be somebody years down the road, believe me, because it's been years for me, that help you and are that person that you call when you're looking for that job that you want. It could be someone beside you or anyone. Find what you're passionate about and start thinking about how you can get experiences in that. Number 2, think about different opportunities with faculty or preceptors or clinicians out in the community who are doing things that you're interested in. One of the things I established was a special topics elective program where students, I have about 10 students a year that work with me on some of the diabetes research I do and some of the underserved focus research I do. And they work with me and they end up doing posters and things like that. The only thing I have when they sign up with me to do these types of things, which anybody who's excited about what they do would love to have you working with them, is that they're interested in it and show a passion for it. 3, if possible, to prepare yourself for the future of practice, think about ways you can engage yourself with other healthcare professions or other people that might be taking care of the same patients you're taking care of in the future. I definitely have established an elective where students go in with pharmacy students go in with medical students, but also interpreters, and see patients that speak Spanish and other languages and take care of them. So if you can at all engage with people that are also going to be in the same field you're in taking care of patients now, that's a great experience to have. And then lastly, just again, focusing on your networking, like we already mentioned, noticing that the profession is small. So engage with anyone that you can.
We'll just go down the line.
Yeah, Danny's going to go.
We're pharmacists. We do things in order. I have to concur with what these two have said. For me, what I found was being open to new opportunities that come along, because you never know where it's going to take you. As I said, I never planned on becoming a clinical terminologist, but it's been fantastic, and I wouldn't change a thing. But it was because I had people who said, oh, we have this position open, or we have this research that we're trying to do, would you be interested in joining in? And the trick to that is it's extra work. But it's always going to be extra work, and it can be actually fun extra work if it's something that you're interested in. I think there's a common trait among folks who are very successful in what they do is that they're not afraid of working hard and doing some extra work, but they're just selective about what they choose to put that effort into. So be open to new opportunities that come along. You never know what you'll learn. If nothing else, you'll learn that you absolutely hate that area, and you never want to go back to that. And that helps narrow down where you're going to go. I agree with also the additional education. I attended a fellowship in biomedical informatics. I have a certificate in biomedical informatics from Oregon Health and Sciences University. And it does, not only does it keep your skills current, because you guys are going to graduate with the freshest knowledge, but 2 years from now, the class coming out after you is going to have fresher knowledge than yours. So you keep yourself and your skills up to date. And employers and colleagues do look at that and say, wow, this person's continuing to grow. They're not just sitting back on their laurels. And it also is another place, again, to network. You meet other professionals in those programs who say, wow, we could really use somebody with your skills. How about in a couple weeks we'll fly you out for a week and talk to you about this. And that's how your career will continue to evolve and grow in new and exciting ways.
I would echo everything that everybody else has said. From my perspective, you can't stop thinking outside the box. Once you limit yourself to the box, you're not going to grow. And that's really key to keeping your practices growing, keeping yourself marketable. I come from a saturated market. We have 2 pharmacy schools right in downtown Pittsburgh. I get 40 to 50 applicants per pharmacist position I post. So what does it say? What do I look for? Well, you have to have a standout resume. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but you really do. You have to market yourself differently than the rest. Don't put something in there personal about yourself so that I think, oh, okay, I think this person's worth bringing in, because you know what? I'm not bringing in 30 to 40 candidates per position. I'm bringing in a maximum of 5 to 8. So something personal in your resume that sets you, what's your drive, what's your motivation, what's your end goal, or what you've done that's been outside of the box so far. I think that helps set you apart. You have to be tenuous. You have to keep yourself educated, keep yourself ahead of that curve. And during your interview process, you have to be professional. You know, we have a resident right now that came in, and, you know, I actually had her on rotation, and I said, so why did you come to your interview with a wrinkled shirt and didn't do your hair or put on an ounce of makeup? I actually had to ask her that question. And she's like, well, it was a new program, so I thought I would get it. And I can tell you, she personally didn't make my cut. She made other people's cut because of her networking. But she would have not made my cut. And if, for my residents, if somebody came in like that, they're automatically discounted. I will tell you up front, you have to look professional, you have to be professional, and you better use your network. I mean, to be honest, if you know that you're going to apply in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Dean McKay connected me to a student that graduated last year, and we've now gone out to lunch, we've gone out to dinner. When I have the other students on rotation, I try and engage with him just to keep in touch. But you better do your homework, and if you find out that somebody knows me, have that person call and say, hey, you know, so-and-so is going to be interviewing, or they applied. My last 2 pharmacists, that's how I hired both of them. I had somebody call me and say, hey, so-and-so said they applied. They're really good. Why don't you take a look at them? And I've had Jessica on rotation with me, and she can tell you that my last 2 hires, Paul and Marlena, are both excellent, and they both came as referrals. So don't burn your bridges. That's, you know, Sally is very right. Pharmacy is a very small world, and if you burn your bridge, you've burnt your bridge for a while. I'll be honest.
My stand. So again, thank you all for taking time out of your day to come out here and talk to us. One question I have is, with so much out there for a career in pharmacy, different fields, etc., how do you organize the job search? There's so many different things coming at you throughout pharmacy school, especially, that you can see and say, I want to do this, no wait, I want to do that. How do you organize it and stay focused through, you know, trying to figure out, navigate your way through it all?
Find your passion. That's the one thing I can tell you, is if you go into a job and you know you're not a good fit, admit you're not a good fit and start looking for a new job. It's the best piece of advice, because, you know, we've all worked with the pharmacist. You guys have all worked with somebody that hates the profession. You don't want to be that person, so find your passion. That's the first thing. Then once you find your passion, you'll find niche areas that, hey, that might be interesting. When I accepted my first job out of residency, I had to play a waiting game. And then they finally said, well, we can hire you as a staff pharmacist right now. That's not our end goal, but this is what we have to do. Sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes you just have to wait, and the opportunities will come. You may have to take a position you don't necessarily want, but if you're working with somebody who understands what you want, you'll get to where you want to be, as long as you are steadfast enough to believe that you can do it.
Take the opportunity now to experience as many different facets of the profession. I know, definitely think outside of the box. There might be some things that certainly there are things we don't even know about that could be areas you can practice, but definitely dip in those things that you know you're interested in now. And then I think of it almost a little bit like looking for a house or something like that. There are certain things you have to have that you won't give up. You need to have 2 bathrooms, not 1. In your profession or how you want to practice, you have these things that you must have, that you're passionate about, that you really, you know, you can't compromise on. And then you have certain things that you can. And really start thinking about that. Your 1-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, things that you want to be doing at that point in your life. I think that's really important to think through this profession, because, again, this is not a job, it's a profession. It's for life. It's your life. And if you think through experiences you want to get now and then where you want to be down the road, I think it will help you focus in your experiences now and getting the job that you want, and make the right contacts, starting to make the right contacts.
As students going out on 4th years, in addition to gaining that knowledge and learning and having that relationship with your preceptor, have half the time it's a job interview while you're there. You know, you want to always put that good foot forward and make that impression, because if it's not a job with them, you know, if it's, let's say you're working in fusion pharmacy and you know that's what you want to do, maybe the preceptor that you had doesn't have an opening, but they know somebody who does. So just keep that in mind as well. What you enjoy, rack and stack it, find your passion, and you'll find a place that works for you.
And I just reiterate that, you know, you're going to have some exposure during the program as you're on rotations, but you can also go into residencies and you can pick a residency that has a broad exposure built within the residency as well. And that's a very, very valid and, you know, question with foresight to ask residency program directors is, you know, does your program focus in one area or another? Where do you feel your program is strong? I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left here, and so I went to a program that gave me a nice balance, ended up doing something that serendipitously fell into my education during the residency. You know, so if you don't know, don't sweat it. It's not like you're never going to have a job. Just put yourself into a position where you'll be exposed to a lot of different opportunities. And I agree, if you get into something and it's not a good fit, it's okay. Say, it's not a good fit, try to figure out where a good fit is, and that will avoid the burning bridge. That's just more open and honest, and you might be surprised at how responsive your boss will be to saying, well, okay, we have something funky coming up, take it on as a project.
And just to echo the job, taking a job that you may not want right now to lead to a job that you could have later. Case in point, when I went to the Indian Health Service, I started out as a floater pharmacist filling in at all the different locations, and I hated it because I was constantly learning peds, I was constantly learning oncology, I was constantly learning home infusion, and I never felt like I was good at anything, and I didn't like it off the bat. But turns out now I've got training in all those things, and all those opportunities are open for me now. So maybe something that you're not comfortable with now can lead you to opportunities later. So just keep that in mind. Maybe you don't want to plan for your next job, but the job after that, if you keep that long-term goal, the job in front of you will take care of itself.
I know, I think you heard all of us say that. We've had several different positions in several different settings, kind of waiting for the perfect fit. When I first went into the military clinic position as a contractor, knowing it would be ambulatory care and patient care, which ended up being an amazing experience. The first month, I basically did paperwork checking off to see if people were eligible for Viagra or not. Had they had the testosterone checked? Had they gone through this? Had they gone through that? And I was like, this is not exactly what I had in mind, but I could talk to people there and make sure that I was going to get where I needed to get eventually. So.
Nope, I'll stand up. For starters, thanks to the alumni panel for putting such a diverse group of folks together. It's nice to see such a different group of, professions. And thanks to you guys too. But because we are,
Thanks to you.
But I know that a lot of us are going to be dealing with finding jobs, because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are retiring right now because of the changes in healthcare. So could you guys touch on maybe some of the most exciting things about the way that healthcare is changing and something we could look forward to, and also some of the scariest things that you're seeing in your diverse fields, because I know that may affect the way that some of us will look for jobs?
I'll take the first one, and it's the same answer for both. Independent practice opportunities for pharmacists and having prescriptive authority. It's super exciting. At the same time, for me personally, I find that the doc gives me almost more professional discretion than I feel comfortable with, so it's scary at the same time, learning what your boundaries are. So I would say for me, that's the scariest thing, but the most exciting thing as well.
Danny, you want to tell them your experience?
I think Dean McKay points to me because I have such a non-pharmacy career. And so working in healthcare IT, I mean, you guys probably know there have been huge sums of money thrown at us, and there have been these really absolutely unrealistic expectations set as well, saying, well, we're going to give you all the money. now in a year we need this stuff to work, and 9 women can't make a baby in a month. Yeah. So that's the struggle in my field, and it's not hurt that way. But that's the struggle we're having too, and I find it exhilarating because folks are so excited to just have the help, and I walk into a room and they find out I have a pharmacy background and they are ecstatic. They're like, aha, because nobody else wants to deal with the meds. And it's somewhat like being in clinical practice that, I work with an epidemiologist, an internal med doc, and then a nutritionist, and then a ton of IT programmers and code writers. And none of them want to be into the nitty-gritty of the clinical aspects of it. So we have lots and lots of work to do. We have very little formalized education. There are very few programs in biomedical informatics. It's where pharmacy schools were 20 years ago, and they're starting to come up, but the formalized education isn't there. So it's a lot of folks just diving in and figuring it out, which I happen to love that. But I was told when they contacted me about this job, they said, if you can't handle change, and I mean, we are talking 1 week, your primary focus is this project, and the next week, bail on that project, your primary focus is something totally different, you can't function in this environment, and it is very true. The flip side of that is I work in a home office in front of a computer for hours and hours on end. So yes, I get to work in my PJs because we have not gotten webcams yet. But it's also very isolated work. It's very detailed work, very nitpicky. Someone who's very sociable and likes that hands-on patient care wouldn't care for this position. So I think it, again, goes back to that idea of know thyself and figure out what are the characteristics you have, what drives you. When you go home from a good day, what was it about that good day that made it good, and bring more of that into your career in some way. Healthcare IT is just the Wild West right now. So if you are brave and you have an inner IT geek, it's a place to go that, I don't know. I got the job because they contacted me. Again, networking. If they find someone who's interested, they'll try to find you. And
Obviously, working with professional athletes is exciting. From my standpoint, and I know somebody else in this room can attest to it, seeing them in their underwear, even better.
Not as exciting as working with students every day.
I mean, did I start out in sports medicine thinking I would actually be interacting with the players? No, I thought I would just be delivering prescriptions. Am I fully functional in interacting with the players? Absolutely. Do the players know my name? Yes. Do some of them even text me nonstop now because, they have my cell phone or they have my, But, just to say what's exciting and how do I keep growing, I'm actually going through concussion training right now, so concussion management and concussion training, and I will be out on the field doing concussion baseline, concussion assessments, and concussion management in the future. So did I come up with that all on my own? No. Some of the P4s that are on rotation with me really helped steer me into another project. But it's exciting because who would have ever thought that I would end up learning a lot about concussion. So I think as the role changes, it just becomes more and more exciting.
And never underestimate the power of your expertise you're getting in this program. I can tell you've heard from all of us, we've placed ourselves at tables where pharmacists haven't been before, and that's when we've seen the most exciting things happen. We're pharmacists, I know you've heard this before, and I know it's a little bit of my academia side coming out, but we're not that great about advocating for ourselves and what we know and what we can do in our area of expertise, but we need to. We need to get at the tables, and I think that's one of the most exciting things is the fact that we're needed at a lot of tables right now in the healthcare system. We're needed on the teams. We're needed to take care of the chronic diseases, which is the scary part. The scary part creates opportunities for us, for all of you. The scary part is we have all these patients with chronic diseases that are being managed poorly in a current primary care system. They're utilizing acute care resources. They're too expensive to care for, and a pharmacist needs to be on every team to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen and that they live longer and have better outcomes. So the scary part is also the exciting part.
So sorry, I don't really know how to word this question, so sorry if it's hard to follow. But you had mentioned areas of pharmacy that haven't been developed yet. How would you recommend those of us who have an interest in an area that hasn't been developed to get into that, especially if we're interested in residency training?
I never had a sports medicine rotation until this past year. And why did I develop a sports medicine rotation? Because Mark Hanna from 2 years ago called me after me simply answering a survey and said, "I'd really like to come spend the day with you." And I said, "I don't know you, but come on down." You know, I think I did make a phone call to Dr. McKay and say, "Is he okay?" Was reassured there. I know that Mark's actually, I think he's pretty close to the Red Wings at this point, right? Yeah. So at the time, he came down when my sports medicine was really fundamentally basic. I wasn't interacting with the players near as much. I wasn't interacting with the doctors near as much. You have to just keep looking for those opportunities and needling. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but every time you have an opportunity to promote yourself or promote your idea, you have to take that chance. If it means, sometimes engaging other people to help you put together business plans to look at things, do it. It's worth it. You never know what the reward is ultimately going to be when you do those things.
If you're looking for those new opportunities or you want to do something in an area that there's not an established practice, don't be scared to go to those folks at the organization where you want to do something and say, "Here's what I'm going to do for you." Don't be scared to knock on that door. Sure, there's a lot of legwork with it, business plans and things like that to put out those established means of justifying your value, but don't be scared to say, "Here's what I'm going to do for you." Is that something you would want? That's how the door opens, is you knock on it.
And I actually read a bunch. I read a bunch of literature. So I've always been big into research. PubMed is my homepage. And I told you, IT geek. So, find out who the names are in the field. I mean, even they don't have to be pharmacists named in the field. Find out who the docs are in the field. Find out who's writing the textbooks. And then, when you go to the conference, make a point of meeting them. If they're doing a roundtable event, sit at their table. Start to put your face in front of theirs. Because mine was I found out about a fellowship that the guru of terminology in the world was running. I somehow weaseled my way into it, and then 4 years later, he was hiring, and he saw my resume come across. Someone presented my CV to him, and he said, "Oh, wait a minute, that's the fellowship I ran. Can I see the picture of the class from that year?" And oh yeah, I remember. And that was the networking path to somebody who I thought was way above my pay grade. But, you have to just, the worst thing that happens is they don't remember you, or you don't get it the first time, but keep sticking with it.
You're a student, right? I know you're in the profession already, but you're a student. Students get more leeway. As long as you act professionally and communicate professionally in your interaction with someone that you'd like to correspond with or connect with, I mean, it's an exciting time for you. Practitioners want to talk to you. They want to find out what's going on in the profession. They feel good that you're interested in hearing about what they're doing. We feel good about it. So it's your time to really make those connections. And I'll never forget one time, one of the physicians I work with who's been a huge advocate for pharmacy in some of the departments that never, ever had supported pharmacy, said, "Do you know what the first thing you did that really impressed me is you came to our clinic and you said, what are your most important issues? What are your biggest issues? What can I do for you?" And it's important to know what you can do for someone with your expertise, but it's also good to ask questions about what you can bring to the table, whether it be help, with research or help developing a business plan or whatever. So.
I have a question. Thank you all for inspiring me so much today. I love coming to Roundtable. I'm probably going to pay attention more today than any other class. But I actually have a question for Dr. Jenny Davis. I remember you came and spoke at our white coat ceremony, and the $11 that you saved that man, that was really inspiring. But my question is, you named like 5 million things that you do. How do you manage your time, and like do you delegate tasks to other people, or like how do you find time to get everything that you want completed?
I will be honest, I work long days. You know, there are days, you know, yesterday I had a mishap in the morning, and you know, it was Jessica's last day on rotation, so I called her and said, yeah, I'm not coming in, I'm spending the day with my daughter. So I do try to balance things out a little bit. I do delegate when I can. I will be honest, I use students a lot to help. I come up with ideas, I run those ideas with them, they give me their input, and again, it's like Sally said, you're fresher than I am. I've been in practice for a while now, you know. Come to me with your ideas, and let's see how we can incorporate them. You know, we delegate, and you know, in my role, I have to delegate. I wear a lot of hats. I meet with the C-suite on a regular basis. I report to the C-suite. It's my job. It can be intimidating, you know, but the good thing is it's always new. There's always something interesting going on. There's always an opportunity to take. You know, do I want to be a sports medicine guru? Did I, or at least 3 or 4 years ago? No, not at all. I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to manage this? Did I want it to grow the way it's grown? No, that wasn't my intent either. But I saw that there was a need, and you find ways to work it out. I mean, there are days I work 6-day work weeks, but I balance it out. Like I'll go in really early or really late when my daughter's engaged in other things at that time. So. I mean, I'll give credit to, you know, like Jessica's been on rotation. She's currently on rotation with me. We knew we had to do a meds to beds and a transition of care program. And so I gave her everything that we had previously done in a pilot, and I said, make it work for me. She did. I give her a lot of credit for that.
Okay. First, I would like to actually thank you all for coming, and second, I have a quick question. I noticed that you all throughout this event keep on talking about the toolbox or so that you all have really built up over the years. What organizations, groups, or types of groups and companies and stuff would you recommend us getting involved in to build up those tools to put in our little toolkit ourselves?
I think that totally depends on what kind of practice you want. In my world, I belong to ASHP. I still do a lot with APHA, and I belong to the 340B Coalition. So.
Because I'm in AMIA, which is American Medical Informatics Association. Yeah, so, and ASHP has an informatics branch as well. So.
I'm also highly involved in lots of pharmacy and medical organizations and underserved, ones that focus on underserved. I think it's important for you all to, exactly what was said, to focus on what you think might best fit your interests or give you the chance to interact with those people that are in your area of focus. But I do think it's key to get engaged in the service of the profession, especially given some of the things we've all given as advice today and ways to network and make connections. That's a great way to do it.
Networking connections too, like myself, I've got a problem and a non-problem is being a military pharmacist. You move around a lot, so I've got this wife who every couple years I rip her up from the job that she's involved in, so half the time the networking's for you, or it's for your spouse, or it's for your friends. You know, if you have a good friend, hey, you know, I'm coming out to this area. Are there any openings that you know of? So for me locally, I think it's important to be involved in your local pharmacy community as well as national organizations. For me, it's ACCP, ASCAP, APHA, the various military pharmacy organizations. I know a few people said, hey, I'm interested in the Navy, and I'm able to take care of those Shenandoah students and steer them to the right direction. So I think that's important to recognize where you want to practice, recognize those professional organizations that you should be affiliated with.
The other thing I would recommend is I frequently go to sports medicine meetings. I don't really belong to a sports medicine organization, but since I have such a focus, I'll go to athletic training, education sessions just to learn a little bit more about what they're doing and how I can interact with them. I go to the CME conferences. I've seen the grossest pictures. I mean, they don't show you anything in pharmacy school compared to what you can see at a sports medicine conference. So I think, sometimes even looking at organizations for things that you might be interested in, you don't necessarily have to join the organization, but start going to some of their conferences or some of their events, and that gives you a good opportunity to find out if that's the type of place that you want to be.
Recently, I was highly engaged also in APHA when I was a student. I know you were too. And in the student organization. And recently, I was awarded, along with my team, a grant through APHA Foundation in Bristol-Myers Squibb, and it was to do pharmacist integrated diabetes care in the safety net. And the person that called me was somebody who had come on site to give me the student scholarship, back when I was here at Shenandoah as a pharmacy student. And I just know, again, I never knew that I would be, talking to her on the phone. And she said, by the way, you guys were awarded this grant. And I think that, didn't know that my time as a student may have made an impact on a grant application that I made to the same, organization years later. So.
My site was also just selected by APHA for RX Vaccinate, so it's just keeping those networks and those connections are so important.
Hello. I'm actually a PharmD MBA student, and I want to know, since I've seen all of you have some sort of like supplemental degree or some sort of certification or post beyond your PharmD, I want to know, why did you pursue that supplemental degree or certification, and sort of following up, like how was it actually beneficial for you afterwards?
I went ahead, the Air Force was kind enough to pay for part of my MPH, so that was the route that I chose. I knew that I wanted to work federal pharmacy, and it's kind of a HMO managed care style, and for me, I thought that that would be a good fit. So that's what I went with, and it's opened the doors to just transition from being more of a staff role and working for that one patient and delivering that one care to taking a more global perspective of health for the organization that you work for. And I think that having that extra education gives you the opportunities when the leaders of the organization look around and say, okay, who can I pick that understands a more global perspective for the organization? So that's the route that I chose.
For me, it was because I actually didn't have the knowledge that I needed. So I couldn't write a SQL statement. And even though I don't code, I have to understand enough of it to speak coherently to someone who does. So I got my clinical background here, but I needed some more IT background. And so the certifications, the fellowship and the certificate that I got were very IT focused and also very focused on electronic health data and what types of components you need to put a system together, what type of support do you need, what kind of architecture, hardware, connections, that sort of thing. So I ended up in a position where I didn't have enough knowledge to do what I felt I needed to do. So I went out and just got some additional education.
I'm not doing anything like I thought I would when I started pharmacy school. I know that Dr. Johnson will probably laugh at this. I was going to be a great clinical cardiology pharmacy specialist when I came to pharmacy school, and I was horrible in cardiology eye care. So I did the MBA just because it was offered. Thought, what the heck? It wasn't a well-planned out thought, although I sometimes think he influenced me a little too much. And really what happened, I think what happened was on my rotations is when I figured out that the MBA was actually beneficial. I had the opportunity to go to Texas and work for Owen Health, which is now Cardinal Health. Spend 3 months there, and it really reshaped what I thought I could do. But, you know, prior to going on that rotation, I was still hardcore. I was going to go and do a clinical, and then I was going to do a second-year residency, and I was going to be a clinical specialist, and that changed.
I think the MBA is a great opportunity and a unique one. I was inspired to do the business degree for 2 reasons. One, I was thinking about industry, and 2, I had a mentor that would inspired me about independent pharmacy ownership, and I had a lack of business knowledge. So it was to learn more and to help. I think sometimes in healthcare, even today when I meet with clinicians that are so focused on the patient that don't have the other perspective, even though patients' responsibility for patient outcomes is number one, we also have to be thinking about the business side of it. And that's true for pharmacy practice models too. All of us have to be thinking about that. So I wanted to get that experience, and it really gave me that, because I don't think otherwise I would have had the ability to take courses that really helped me think through how to develop a business plan or to think about the cost of a population management of a drug program and things like that. And lastly, I thought it was great because you know how you can become so pharmacy-centric that you forget that the real world, maybe you guys aren't like that now in the new age, but back in the old age, I felt like we became so focused to be able to engage with those outside of pharmacy during pharmacy school gave me an enhanced perspective on what I mentioned earlier, what our expertise is, and then also what the real world is looking for and how they can utilize our expertise. And I think it has been beneficial for me to have the degree. The other letters I think some of us have for different reasons, but in the military clinics and also obviously in an academic field or a clinical field, pharmacists haven't figured out the quite mix, I guess, in different states or how we should be credentialed to do certain to kind of broaden our scope of practice, I think. And so in some settings like military clinics and academia, some of the further training like the diabetes degree, the diabetes certification or the board certification in pharmacotherapy help to differentiate and show extra training to become credentialed to do more higher level patient care experiences. Not that you guys aren't going to be ready to do that stuff too, it's just a way to differentiate with that piece.
I'm going to piggyback on that for board certification. Right now I sit on the Clinical Pharmacy Advisory Committee, and we advise the Surgeon General how to best utilize clinical pharmacists within the federal government. And credentialing and scope of practice is a huge issue that keeps coming back for what we address. And the one overarching theme that keeps coming up is if you're board certified, okay, then they're fine to have this advanced scope of practice, but if you're not, how do you differentiate between pharmacists who graduated in 75 versus pharmacists who graduated in 2005? And that is, if you're board certified, that automatically gives you a leg up and an understanding of what you're capable of beyond a minimum competency test with your NAPLEX. So there's another plug for that.
And to be honest, my MBA allows my C-suite to understand me that I'm not just a pharmacist. And that's a huge factor in a lot of what I am able to accomplish.
Hi. Thank you guys again for being here and all your responses. Sorry, I'm over here. I just had a specific question for Dr. Teller. Is Teller right? I just want to know what a day, can you like describe a day with the Indian Health Services, like what you would be doing, your schedule and everything?
Sure. My time with the Indian Health Service, well, the first few months that I was there, I kind of rotated and did a lot of different responsibilities, from peds to home infusion to hematology, oncology to ICU to internal medicine to you name it. I rotated through it, and that for me was challenging. I wanted to work in the ICU, so I'll give you the day in the life there. I usually would come in around 5 o'clock. The lab values for the morning lab draws that were drawn at 4 usually had resulted and printed up by about 5:15-ish. So I'll come in and I'll start reviewing the meds that the patients were on, see if there's been any changes, start looking at the lab values that they're on, and then in the ICU start thinking about the interventions that I can make as a pharmacist. Whether it's they're receiving appropriate DVT prophylaxis, whether they're on a PPI, are they intubated, what considerations do I need to make because of that, and then try and have any cultures that may have come back, tailoring antibiotic therapy to be appropriate. So make all those judgments based upon lab values, nutrition status, and be ready to advise the doc when we round on that. After that, the back half of the day would be mostly pharmacokinetics, any sort of dosing adjustments that needed to be done for any narrow therapeutic index drugs or therapy optimization drugs, gentamicin, vancomycin, phenytoin levels, other lab values that may play into that. So the back half of the day was basically geared towards that. And then order entry or consulting with any sort of the specialty providers that have been called in, knowing that they asked for a neuro consult. Is there anything that I can add to that patient when the doc's there to see them? So usually went in around 5. It was busy. There was no lunch break with the Indian Health Service. They ran you ragged, but it was great, great clinical opportunities there.
Hey, this question is for, God, again, what's the deal? For Dr. Keller, the majority of my student colleagues are too young to be thinking about retirement, but it's something that I preach a lot to a lot of you, know who you are. But I'm pro-military, so could you talk a little bit about the benefits of a federal job, federal retirement, the age that you'll be when you...
Oh, yes. This is gonna take a minute. I see Dean creeping up on me. If you could just stiff arm him here for a second, keep him away. I can't say enough. Job satisfaction for federal pharmacy is enormous. You can retire after 20 years of active duty time. Sometimes they'll count some reserve time. I'm sitting about 11 years till I can actually retire. I'm 30 years old right now. So who wants to retire at 41? This guy right here. So that's an option to keep in your pocket. One thing that's nice, after you work 30 years for the federal government on active duty, they don't really give you a choice. They kick you out. So that 20-year window, you can leave when you want, keep working if you love it. I personally think I'm going to put in 30 years because I love my job. The amount of vacation time you get 30 days of vacation time, as well as opportunities to do educational things without having to take vacation time for it. When I go to a conference, I'm not taking vacation time for that. I still get my 30 days leave. Who works on Columbus Day? Not this guy. So I mean,
teachers get a lot of time off too.
So the job satisfaction, the educational opportunities, the retirement at 20 years. If I want, I can do a second career and go work for somebody else and have that retirement coming in. It's wonderful. I love it. So I can't say enough good things about it. If you want to hear more, I'm available after class. I don't do parties though, so you're out of luck there.
You see how difficult it is to train some people, particularly from their Texas roots and from their independent mindset. But that's also what sets them apart from the crowd. And I think the whole purpose behind this is to set you apart from the crowd. A lot of you are going to be in competition with each other and students from other schools. It's never too soon to start thinking about how you're going to differentiate yourself just the way these individuals did to make for a successful career. There's no promise out there. Yeah, you can find a job if that's what you want, but if you want a successful career, that takes work. And these guys put in the time and the effort, and they're still putting in the time and the effort to do it. But you're not in it alone. I want to have the faculty and the alumnus to stand up. These are your partners, because when you're successful, they brag about you. And if you use them intelligently while you're here, not just as an academic resource, but as someone who can open doors for you, just like Jenny mentioned that I called her up when I knew one of our students was going to Pitt to do postgraduate, and I said, this is somebody you really need to talk to. She took it from there. And the faculty that you see here will do the same thing for you. But they have to know that you're interested in a certain area, and they have to know somebody in that area that they can introduce you to. But it does happen, and it happens quite frequently, probably more frequently than you imagine, that we open doors for you after you leave us because we vicariously enjoy the experiences that you're happening. Ben and I ran into each other this summer in August down in Virginia Beach, He was sitting in the front getting continuing education. I kept looking at him from the back, and I said, I know that guy. And when he got up to go to the bathroom, he has a little bladder. I grabbed him and took him out in the hall, and I said, how are you doing, and why did you change uniforms? And that's when I found out what he was doing. So we take a great deal of pride and interest in what you're doing in your career well before you actually launch your career. And we can help you in that achievement. So you have to take advantage of the faculty that you saw stand. You have to take advantage of these individuals and get over the difference sometimes that you see them as faculty or successful alumni. They're not just that. They're colleagues. And they take a great deal of pride and joy in seeing you as successful as they are. And they got to where they are because other people took an interest in them. So take advantage of it. Thanks to the Alumni Association for the pizza and the time, to Jane Pittman, who's got a lot on her mind right now, to her daughter, who's got even more on her mind. I want to thank everybody for being here, especially our 4 distinguished guests, and I think they deserve a round of applause.
Thank you all for being here.
It's not kidding about the small bladder. It's true.
You really have to get it.
All the time. It's terrible. Terrible. I think it comes from my caffeine addiction. Well, I'm sure it does.
I was taking my second